I'll just start right off. So for people who aren't familiar with Des Bishop, you have a very interesting background. You were born in London, and then you grew up in New York, and as a teenager you moved to Ireland, and that's when you really started comedy. I'm just trying to figure out what the comedy scene in Ireland is like compared to the comedy scene in what is the mecca of comedy, New York City.
Yeah, well, I didn't have anything to compare it to because when I started doing comedy in Ireland, I was 21. I went to boarding school there when I was 14, so I actually had been living in Ireland since I was a teenager. But my family was still in New York. But I didn't know the New York comedy scene. So the only comedy scene I knew was the small Irish comedy scene, which for me, I was kind of lucky because I was a fish out of water. To Irish people, I was just this New York kid, but I knew a lot about Ireland because I was educated there. So I had a lot of easy laughs early on, and it was also a small scene, so there was a lot of camaraderie. It was very supportive. It wasn't as cutthroat as what I would learn later on. The New York comedy scene, it's really hard to get started there, So I really feel like I had a soft launch as a stand-up comedian, and by the time I was doing stuff internationally, I really just had a lot of experience. So it was really I was kind of lucky, actually, I'd say, to start in Ireland. But on the flip side, I was unlucky in that the things that Irish people found so funny that I was talking about were virtually meaningless anywhere outside of Ireland. So I would leave Ireland feeling like I was Richard Pryor, and I would arrive in Edinburgh or Melbourne, Australia, and feel like an open mic, being like, I have no idea what's funny to these people, So pros and cons.
So is that the reason why, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you went to China and stayed in China and went to school in China to learn Chinese? Did you do that specifically so you could do stand-up in Chinese? Yeah,
that was for a TV show, for Irish TV. So by the time I did that, I was pretty well established in Ireland as a comedian who makes immersion documentaries or sort of deep experiential amounts of time where we'd make an entertainment documentary, but there would also be stand-up about the experience. And I'd already done it with the Gaelic language, and I had my own fascination with trying to learn Mandarin. So when I pitched it that it would be foreign comic moves to China and has 1 year to learn enough Mandarin to do stand-up comedy in Mandarin for a Chinese audience in China. But really, it was a vehicle to tell the story of modern China because I had visited and I found it fascinating, and the world seemed to be fascinated with China, but also curious about China. So I just thought it would be an interesting way to tell the story of the Chinese people. Everyone at that time, especially, that was 2013 when I went there, but 2008 when I originally pitched the idea, everybody was like, China, horrible government, the economy's exploding, all these things, all valid. I'm definitely not a fan of the Chinese government. But what I never saw was, what is Chinese life really like? What are the Chinese people really like? And my experience had been that they were very funny. So I really just wanted to tell the story of the Chinese people through this journey of trying to learn their language fast enough and learn their humor and what they find funny fast enough that after 1 year I could have this experience. And I think we did that. It's on YouTube, actually, if you're bored, Breaking China, the series. But anyway, that's what it was. So it was for a TV show. It wasn't totally like a personal pet project. I mean,
you weren't out to
going to be on TV.
Conquer China. You did it for the TV show.
But yeah,
it came out pretty well.
I did it for TV. It was for my ego, really, but it came out well. And honestly, I liked it so much. The truth is, I liked it so much that after a year, when I was done, I decided to spend another year in China, not making the TV show anymore, and also going back to traveling internationally to do stand-up, but to base myself in China because now I could speak Mandarin. I wanted to use it, and I wanted to keep doing stand-up in Mandarin with all these new friends that I'd made. So I ended up spending 2 years in China, but the series is about my first year, and the second year was just my normal life.
Being a half Chinese myself, my father's side. Actually, he's from Taiwan.
Really?
He's from Taiwan, actually. And I've visited my family over there a bunch of times. It just seems like when you first encounter people in Taiwan, anyway, I get the stare, and they seem very emotionless and cold. I can't even imagine getting up and trying to do stand up and, like you saying, trying to figure out what's funny to these particular people and having you like a white guy try to be funny to Chinese people. That must have been an extreme challenge.
Yeah, so it's very interesting that you say that, because that's like inside knowledge thing. So that's everybody's impression of Chinese people in general,
Right.
including Taiwan, right? Is that they're kind of cold and stoic. And what I found was the language is like the key to break through that initial door. And beyond that door is like really good sense of humor, like really good. But the problem is that, when you don't have the language to break through that, it can feel that way. And the joke that I said in the show, I think, whether it was in the show or on stage, I would always say that people think that the Chinese are a bit cold. But when there's 1.4 billion people, you don't have time to be friendly to everybody. You spend your whole day, with niceties. We got things to do. We don't have time.
Right.
But once you're in the club, like once you make friends, they're actually very warm and extremely hospitable, which I'm sure you found when you've gone to Taiwan. I did stand up in Mandarin in Taiwan, but actually it was one of the harder shows for me, because similar to when I would leave Ireland and go to other places, a lot of the humor of the mainland, these were jokes that were like very much like mainland cultural experiences that weren't the same in Taiwan,
Mm-hmm.
And so that was an interesting cultural moment for me of trying to make the Taiwanese audience laugh. And in fairness, this is not a slight on China, but I think in general, the Taiwanese are like, the audience anyway, like a little more worldly, a little more cosmopolitan at that time. And so actually, I think they were a bit cooler, and they weren't as impressed with the fact that I could bang out a bit of Mandarin.
Well, I think it's just fascinating. And you're did I read this right? You're learning Spanish too, and it just seems like you have this fascination with languages that can just also help you with your career. Not that you set out to do that, but I don't know of any other comedian that's done a stand-up in Gaelic and in Mandarin and now maybe Spanish if you go through with this. Do you know any other comedians doing that?
Well, Eddie Izzard, the British comic,
Mm-hmm.
he's had some American specials. He's done some stuff, but he went through a period of his career where he was doing his show in various different languages, but he was translating his show, but it was still a very impressive feat. And he was really exploring what humor is universal and what humor isn't.
Yeah.
And so he did it in a kind of a different way. I mean, the Spanish thing is just because myself and my wife were spending some time in Miami, so I was like, when in Rome. But I'm not learning Spanish in the same way as those other projects. It's not like part of a specific project. But the fun thing about learning Spanish is that when you talk about learning it, a lot of Americans, even non-Latin Americans, have had the experience of trying to learn Spanish. So you have the shared experience of the struggle. Whereas when I do jokes about Chinese, you don't really have the shared experience of the struggle. So you have to make it funny in other ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, your new special is Bridge and Tunnel. It's on Hulu right now. It's streaming, and you touch on a very sensitive subject that I experienced. That I've heard other comics take on, and it just stirs up such vitriol. Is that you're someone who's not having kids, and it's like I have a child, and I'm glad I had a child and stuff, but I never understood why people got so upset by people who decided not to have kids.
Yeah, and it's interesting because my wife and I actually we're trying to have a kid now, so I'm not against having kids, but that bit does really well for me actually, and I don't even know how it evolved, but it probably started at a time where I just had accepted that I wasn't going to have them, and it's just one of those interesting things, like certain topics, just people have very strong opinions about on either side, and it's just. But, I get it, though, because it's like the essence of our existence is that we reproduce, right? And obviously we've evolved to a point where we're doing a lot of stuff that's like a little bit outside, like what was probably expected for humanity. Like we've really evolved quite a lot as a species. So the fact that we now, we can cure loads of cancers and all these other things that have sort of evolved outside of nature. But for some reason, when it comes to deciding, you know what, I'm just not going to reproduce a version of me, people have strong opinions. And I like that. I'm open to both sides of the argument. I think it's great comedy fodder, and people are gonna say what they want to say. And here's the thing. Everybody knows the minute you have a kid. A friend of mine, he's a comedian also, but I was saying to him before I met Hannah, I was saying, like, I'm just good, man. Like, I just don't want to have a kid. Like, I'm so tired. And when my friends are around with their kids, I just can't handle it. And he's like, nah, once you have your own, you're going to love it. Kids are like farts. Your own ones don't smell. So I know that when we have a kid, I'm going to be like, I know when I have a kid, I'm going to be like, I should have done this earlier, And I wasn't against having kids. It's just the way it worked out. I just ended up not settling down with somebody till much later in my life. And, that's the way it is. But that bit works well. But also, I like that bit too, because I get to indulge in a little bit of looking after your parents when they're old humor, which is actually one of my favorite subjects.
Yeah, I've seen your bit on that about your death being a very tiny part of your life, and that's the weird reason to have kids. Yeah. Well, only because people do actually say that, though. Like the motivation for that bit is that people say you don't want to die alone. That's what people say. And so it's really an argument against the ridiculousness of that. And also, honestly, listen, without getting too deep, it's also not fair because some people just try to have kids and they can't. Yeah.
And are you dismissing like their human experience? It's like, oh, that's different. They didn't have a choice. But when you have a choice, it's more screwed up. So it's fun. These are the fun arguments of life.
Right. Well, Des Bishop, thank you very much for taking the time this morning. I appreciate it. Bridge and Tunnel is streaming on Hulu right now. Check it out. And definitely on YouTube, check out it's Des Bishop Breaking China. Is that what it was?
Yes.
Yeah,
that's what it's called. Yes.
I've only gotten through the first episode, but really amazing. Just like you said, it's like once you get to know people, especially through their language, it just totally changes your whole outlook on them, and it's a great stuff there. So thank you very much for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Nice chatting.